morning. Thank you for having me. I want to convey what the movement was like in the United States that swept out Bush and the neoconservatives and elected a black man who just might take up grassroots people's agendas. This was the first time in my lifetime, anyway, that any significant number of people actually worked in an electoral campaign. And in this case, it was millions of people. People worked in the last presidential election to try to stop the theft of the election, but for the most part didn't actively campaign for any candidate. And if you did campaign, it was through your local Democratic Party or Green Party headquarters. Not so in this election. You volunteered directly for Barack Obama, not for the Democratic Party. The Obama campaign opened offices in dozens of neighborhoods all over the country, mainly by people donating vacant buildings to the cause and volunteers staffing them and raising money to keep them open. The Democratic Party was a bit irrelevant. Now, early on in the Obama campaign, the strike wrote to the Women's Vote Coordinator, introducing ourselves and seeing how we could be helpful in countering Democratic challenger Hillary Clinton during the primaries, who, though a woman, represented the status quo, and also in countering Republican vice presidential candidate Sarah Palin and her claim to be representing the working class and mothers. Now, the Women's Vote Coordinator said, "Your work is great," but they were so pressed that we were left to figure out for ourselves how to be involved. And if you wanted to be involved in any aspect of the Obama campaign, you just had to go down to an office or organize something yourself. 5 times I signed up to house people before I finally got a response, even though they were desperate for housing. The Obama campaign really had trouble keeping up with the movement behind Obama. They couldn't keep the offices stocked with equipment, and they couldn't keep up with those who volunteered. The strike was also involved through Margaret Prescott of Women of Color in the Global Women's Strike, who is also host of a radio show on KPFK Pacifica Radio in Los Angeles. She covered the campaign by bringing out the voices of those who are working at the grassroots level. And Payday spread the word about the Utility Workers Union Get Out the Vote campaign in different parts of the United States. And others in the strike volunteered in all kinds of ways, unless I brought you there. My involvement was in housing out-of-town Obama volunteers. Thousands of people descended on Pennsylvania to help get out the vote. I housed, all told, about 30 people, even though I signed up for 2 or 3. Some for 1 or 2 nights, and some for over a month. People in my building helped with bedding, cooking, cleaning, and driving. And it brought our building closer together and brought us closer together with our neighborhood, which is a mixed-race neighborhood. And you would go to the bus stop or the train stop and just start talking with people. And little kids would see your Obama bumper sticker and yell out, "I'm voting for Obama too." And at the rallies or campaign offices, you ran into people from your church or your workplace, and your relationships with them changed. And also the notion of private property kind of went out the window. If you had a car, you handed over your car keys, and you got your car back at the end of the election. And your house was also kind of taken over. You woke up in the morning like, "Is that person here when I went to bed last night?" So it was kind of like that. And I got a close-up look at the people who were really dedicating their lives to this election. They had taken a semester off of school or a year off of school. They quit their jobs. They used their vacation time and their sick leave. And they were remarkably diverse. A black trade unionist, a white lesbian grandmother, a retired corporate executive, the former head of a young Republican club, a Kenyan college student. One young woman who stayed with us was working on Wall Street. She said, "The hell with it," quit her job on a Friday, went to Obama training camp on the weekend, and was assigned to Philadelphia on Monday. And she showed up at my door and stayed a month. Another white Southerner parents contributed to the Obama campaign by paying her expenses for 6 months. A third was a Cuban immigrant family, not traditionally a Democratic stronghold. They all worked their tails off. They all got colds. I made chicken soup, gave them homeopathy, and got them back out on the campaign trail. But the diversity was typical. Those who worked for Obama and who went to the inauguration were majority women, 60 to 70%. It was also about 50-50 people of color and white, and mainly young. This was a multiracial, multi-generational, but largely young women's movement for Obama, who himself is diverse. He's an African-American man who grew up in Indonesia, the largest Muslim country in the world. He grew up in Pakistan and Hawaii, which is very international and mixed race. He was raised by a white single mother and grandmother, lived in a mixed race family, and spent some years in community organizing. He's not exactly a movement leader, as he's a politician, but there is a movement. And during the election, I saw something of what I had seen in Venezuela, where people are engaged in the process, working hard without pay, all for change. And just like in Venezuela, the majority of those working for it are women and people of color. And they're working for Obama not just because he's black, but as Selma told us earlier, as Oprah Winfrey said, because he's brilliant. It was also a movement in that people themselves moved and changed. People who never voted before voted. People who never voted Democratic before voted Democratic. People who never voted for someone black and thought they never would voted for someone black. People who never volunteered. And the left parties were nowhere to be seen. They didn't seem to know what to do with this mass movement. And they don't know what to make of someone like Obama, who appears, as we say in the strike, to be using the state against the state. So first, Obama beat Hillary Clinton, which was really the first victory against business as usual. And then the general election began, and you were glued to the news, especially MSNBC, which is the liberal Democratic news commentators, where you got your ammunition and your reinforcement and your hope. And then Obama beat McCain. And you really held your breath until the last minute. After the election was stolen in 2000 and 2004, you didn't know what they were going to pull. But you felt, my God, what is it going to take? I mean, here you have this far superior candidate, a gifted person in control of himself, a modern person who had millions of people involved in electing him, who split the powers that be, and running against a party whose leader, Bush, had a 20% approval rating, and who had run the country into the ground financially and killed probably millions of people around the world and in the US. And if Obama doesn't win with all that, what would it take? But he did win. And when you let your breath out, it was not with hoops and hollers of excitement, but with tears of relief and joy and a sense of the weight of the moment. I mean, it was hard to be happy in the midst of a deep and painful economic depression, one that impacts women and people of color first and foremost. But you felt at the time that history was made and you were a part, and you could not believe what you had accomplished after years of protests and working against a biased media, coming up against institutions that were supposed to represent you but betrayed you. And you felt like we finally did the right thing, and it was such a victory.